Imagine you're a Spanish Inquisitor, and the year is 1620.
Okay.
You've just trekked through, like, 3 grueling days of freezing mountain mud, just
No.
hacking your way through this dense jungle canopy.
Sounds miserable.
Oh, completely. And you're doing all this to inspect a supposedly poor, devout Catholic farmer up in the remote highlands of Puerto Rico.
Right.
So you finally arrive, totally exhausted. The family welcomes you in. The Friday night Shabbat candles, well, they've been blown out for hours. There's a pork stew bubbling over the fire. You check the man's ledger, and it just shows a modest, totally legal trade of ginger.
Nothing to see here.
Exactly. He signs his name, Rivera. You give him your blessing, and you leave completely satisfied. You have absolutely no idea that you just audited a multi-million-dollar smuggling node run by a secret Jewish nobleman.
It's just the ultimate sleight of hand. I mean, when we think of massive state secrets, we tend to picture locked vaults or, redacted documents, heavily fortified bunkers.
Yeah, James Bond stuff.
Exactly. But this history forces us to completely rethink the concept of secrecy. Because true invisibility isn't about hiding in the dark. It's about standing directly in the light, being seen constantly, and never being truly understood.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking you on a journey to uncover a 400-year-old state secret that was hidden entirely in plain sight.
It's an incredible story.
It really is. We're working from this brilliantly detailed historical presentation script today. It's titled The Invisible Web of Boriquén, Decoding the Sephardic Alpine Refuge.
Right, and it's backed by some seriously rigorous academic research. We're talking about historians like Jorge Luis Chania, Jeffrey Malka, the Emanuels, and Hugh J. Schonfield.
Yeah, a phenomenal body of work. And it focuses heavily on the 16th and 17th centuries. We're looking at crypto-Jews, specifically conversos, who were desperately fleeing the terrifying global reach of the Spanish Inquisition.
Right, they were running for their lives.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to fully grasp what these families pulled off, we have to look past that standard narrative of victims just, running away to hide in a cave somewhere.
Yeah, they didn't just flee.
Exactly. They actively transformed the western and central corridors of Puerto Rico into this highly coordinated, economically sophisticated safe haven.
Which is why this requires us to look at the history through the lens of systems engineering. I mean, this isn't just a story about surviving religious persecution.
No, it's so much bigger than that.
It really is. It's a masterclass in cryptography, logistical planning, and systemic logic. The level of architecture required to build an entire shadow society right under the nose of the Spanish crown is staggering.
So to understand how they built this shadow society, we basically have to start with the dirt under their feet. Because before you can hide secret messages or smuggle illicit goods, you first have to physically keep the authorities at arm's length.
Geography is your first line of defense. In the early 1600s, the Spanish Empire was ruthlessly centralized. I mean, if you look at major colonial hubs like Mexico City or Lima, the Holy Office of the Inquisition was active and just brutal.
Yeah.
They were running auto da fes, which are these horrific, highly public acts of interrogation, property seizure, and execution.
And the capital of Puerto Rico, San Juan, was essentially an extension of that exact paranoia.
Yeah.
It was a walled fortress islet, heavily garrisoned, constantly audited, and tightly controlled by the crown.
Exactly.
So if you were a converso family trying to maintain a secret religious identity, San Juan is the absolute last place on earth you want to set up shop.
So you go where the crown is not. Historically, dissidents moved to the periphery, and in this case, they went to San Germán.
Which is a beautiful place today.
Oh, today San Germán is a charming town. But back in the 16th and 17th centuries, it was a massive administrative jurisdiction. It literally covered the entire western half of the island. And to those paranoid bureaucrats sitting in the capital of San Juan, the West was an absolute administrative black hole.
Yeah, the official records actually describe the region as wild and rebellious. And looking at the topography, I mean, it's obvious why.
Oh, the landscape is intense.
Right. If an inquisitor in San Juan wants to audit a family out west, there's no easy road. They have to physically mount an expedition.
Which took major resources.
It's to traverse the Cordillera Central mountains, slog through seemingly bottomless mud, survive the freezing high peaks of Jayuya, and then navigate the treacherous volcanic ridges of Coamo.
And that's all before they even reach the coastal valleys of San Germán.
It's wild.
It was a punishing, dangerous journey. And that sheer physical friction provided what we call geographic immunity. By the time a royal bureaucrat organized an expedition, secured supplies, and survived the trek, word had already traveled ahead of them. You had days, if not weeks, of warning before they ever arrived at your doorstep.
It's like using mountains and mud to build a massive physical firewall around your community.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, mountains only keep you safe if no one ever comes looking? What happens when an inspector actually knocks on your door? Because a firewall only works until someone finds a way through.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. You build what historians refer to as a closed diaspora.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's an ecosystem that actually thrives on the destruction of its own data. See, the western coast of Puerto Rico was constantly being targeted by Corsair raids.
Basically state-sponsored pirates from rival empires, right?
Exactly. And during these violent raids, the local official Spanish archives and tax records were frequently burned to the ground.
That sounds like a disaster for the local government.
Oh, a total disaster for the bureaucrats, but an absolute gift for a secret society. Every time the records burned, the slate was wiped clean.
Wow.
The lack of reliable documentation became the community's greatest tactical asset. In a system obsessed with pedigree and paper trails, the lack of information actually was the information.
But if an inspector does survive the mud and actually knocks on your door, hiding behind a burned record isn't a long-term strategy. I mean, they are going to look you in the eye and ask for your papers. They want your name.
And that requires a much deeper level of camouflage.
Yeah.
Physical distance buys you time, but to survive an audit face-to-face, the camouflage has to be woven into your very identity.
Which brings us to Onomastic Steganography. And for anyone listening, this concept is just brilliant.
Let's define the terms for a second.
Sure.
Steganography is a concept we usually apply to digital security today. It's the practice of hiding a secret file, like an image or a text message, inside another completely ordinary-looking file so no one even knows the secret exists.
Right, hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And onomastic refers to names. So onomastic steganography is the act of hiding deeply protected religious and cultural data inside a perfectly normal-sounding name.
But wait, in a lot of standard genealogy, don't people usually look at common Iberian surnames? Like Lopes or Gomes, and just assume that's proof of a crypto-Jewish past. Because we know conversos adopted those names during forced conversions.
They do, but from a rigorous historical perspective, a surname like Lopes isn't proof of anything on its own.
Because it's so common.
Right. Lopes literally just means son of Lope. It doesn't encode a theology. The families clustering in the Puerto Rican highlands, from the ports of Mayaguez up through the ridges of Coamo and Jayuya, they were doing something much more sophisticated.
Right. They weren't just picking random Catholic names out of a hat.
No, they were engineering them as tactical tools.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They essentially built a zip file for their religious heritage, hiding it right on their birth certificates.
What's fascinating here is how specific it gets.
Yeah, let's look at the 4 specific examples from the sources because it shows how this actually worked. The first one is Rivera, or Rios.
Right. So if you are a Spanish inspector, Rivera is the ultimate mundane decoy. You're standing in the mountains, speaking to a farmer who lives near a stream. His name means by the river, or rivers. It's perfectly natural topography.
Sure, no red flags there.
But internally, within the closed Sephardic network, Rivera was a steganographic reference to Meim Chaim, which is the Hebrew concept of living waters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it secretly preserved the memory and the requirement of the mikveh, the ritual purification bath. They hid a core religious practice inside a topographic description.
Think about that for a second. If your name is Rivers, nobody asks questions. But to the right person, you're signaling a sacred rite.
Exactly.
The second example is Torres, or de la Torre. To the outside world, it sounds like you're just named after some prominent local architecture, like a tower.
But internally, it encrypts a crucial scriptural concept from the Book of Proverbs, Migdal Oz, which translates to the Tower of Strength. So in a community constantly under threat, taking the name Torres was a cryptographic beacon signaling divine protection to anyone else in the network who knew how to decode it.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Then you have the families living in the most remote, highly elevated regions of Coamo and Jayuya using names like Serrano and Montes. To the naked eye, these people are just highland farmers. It literally just means mountain dwellers.
Yet the internal meaning was Har Sinai, or He Harem, Mount Sinai, or the High Sanctuary.
They literally mapped the sacred geography of their faith directly onto the physical geography of their Caribbean refuge.
Is brilliant.
And the fourth example from the sources is Leon. To a Spanish official, naming yourself after a lion is standard nomenclature. It perfectly aligns with Catholic saint symbols and European heraldry.
But internally, it's a direct, literal claim to Gur Aria Yehuda, the lion cub of Judah. It allowed a family with high tribal nobility to carry their royal lineage permanently through the fire of the Inquisition, totally invisible to the Holy Office.
It's just breathtaking linguistic precision. But we have to look at the practical reality of survival here, because as brilliant as this onomastic camouflage was, a community cannot survive on clever names alone.
No, you can't eat a cryptographic surname.
Exactly. If you are going to sustain a hidden society for centuries, how do you feed them? How do you build wealth when you are essentially locked out of the official economy?
You have to build an economy completely outside the law.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to really understand how they got away with this, you have to look at what the Spanish crown was doing at a macro level. The Spanish Empire operated a massive, incredibly strict trade monopoly known as the Carrera de Indias.
And legally, every single ounce of trade from the colonies had to go through Spain.
Every single ounce. And it was agonizingly slow, suffocated by endless bureaucracy, and hopelessly overpriced.
So the crypto-Jewish families in the Western Corridor looked at this bloated monopoly and just bypassed it entirely. They created the Caribbean Contraband Trade Network.
Which is no small feat.
Right. Because how do you do that? You can't just casually start a global smuggling syndicate from a mud hut in the mountains.
You do it through meticulous vertical integration. It was structured almost exactly like a modern supply chain.
Okay, break that down for me.
So you have the families living high up in the isolated fertile mountains of Jayuya and Coamo. They're responsible for growing the high-value cash crops, things like ginger, sugar, and tobacco.
Okay, and then you have the families living further down in the San Germán Valley. Their job is logistics. They operate the mule trains, navigating the treacherous paths to transport these goods from the mountains down to the sea.
Precisely. And finally, you have the families situated in the coastal ports of Mayagüez. They act as the brokers. Under the cover of darkness, they coordinate clandestine rendezvous with Dutch and English privateers anchored offshore.
Wow.
They trade the premium mountain crops for European essentials, totally tax-free and completely off the Spanish ledgers.
And the cover stories were amazing. When a nosy royal official from San Juan occasionally wandered into town and asked why a supposedly poor mountain farmer had a house full of fine Dutch vellum books or expensive European linens.
The standard excuse was literally, oh, it must have floated ashore.
Just a very convenient time.
Very convenient. But this localized Puerto Rican smuggling was just one node. It connected to a massive Sephardic global mercantile web. These families were coordinating with relatives scattered across Amsterdam, London, Curacao, and Jamaica.
So they have a mountain safe haven and a global corporate network. Yeah. But how are they communicating with the outside nodes in Amsterdam or Curacao without getting caught by Spanish censors? You can't exactly write a letter that says, hey, the illegal ginger shipment is on the boat, love to the family, signed the secret Jewish high priest.
No, the Spanish censors would intercept it immediately.
Right.
And if an inquisitor inspects your business ledgers and finds right-to-left Hebrew script or overtly Jewish terminology, the punishment isn't a fine. It's imprisonment, torture, or death.
Yeah, the stakes were literally life or death.
So they needed a form of end-to-end encryption that could survive a 17th century audit. They needed the Atbash cipher.
This is where the history basically turns into a full-blown spy thriller. Explain how Atbash actually works.
Atbash is an ancient monoalphabetic symmetric substitution code.
That sounds incredibly complicated.
It sounds highly technical, but the mechanism is actually very elegant. You take the 22-letter Hebrew alphabet and you just fold it in half. You map the first letter to the last, the second to the second to last, and so on. So Aleph becomes Tav, Bet becomes Shin.
And because it's a perfect symmetric mirror, if you know the alphabet, you know the code. You don't need to carry around a physical decoder ring or a code book.
Exactly, which is crucial because holding a code book would be a death sentence if the authorities searched your house.
But hold on, I'm confused here. If Atbash is a Hebrew code, but they are writing their business ledgers in Spanish or Portuguese to look normal to the inspectors, how does a Hebrew cipher work inside a Spanish ledger without looking like complete gibberish?
That is the genius of it. They used phonetic masking. They didn't write actual Hebrew letters. They wrote their ledgers using standard Latin script in perfectly normal Spanish or Portuguese.
Wait, really?
Yeah, but they deliberately chose mundane Spanish words that sounded exactly like the encrypted Hebrew words when read aloud.
Oh, wow. So they're hiding the sound of the code inside the everyday language of the colonizer.
Exactly.
The sources show that researchers have identified 10 specific conclusive decodes found in the historical ledgers from Mayagüez, San Germán, Coamo, and Joya. Let's walk through what this actually looks like on the page, because it paints a picture of an entire shadow economy operating right under the inspector's nose.
Okay, imagine that Spanish inspector opening a ledger. The first thing he sees is a note about a merchant named Segar. To the inspector, it looks like a standard surname derived from a word meaning to enclose. But phonetically, run through the Atbash mirror, it is noshag, a specific Hebrew term for a trader or dealer authorized to handle high-value contraband.
Oh, man. Right next to that, the inspector sees a meaningless phonetic note that just looks like a regional spelling quirk.
Right, but that note resolves to kippin, meaning spices or precious roots. They are using this decoy to log the exact, highly illegal cargo quantities of ginger they were smuggling, keeping the real numbers totally invisible.
Then the inspector looks at the financial column. He sees the Spanish word paz, meaning peace. It looks like a standard pious Catholic sign-off.
But phonetically, it resolves to OH, an acronym for Asher Gadol, great wealth. They're tracking multi-million-dollar financial assets without ever writing down a word related to money.
And sometimes that same word, paz, is written with a heavy consonant emphasis. To the inspector, it's just messy handwriting. But to the network, it decodes to vataf, Aramaic for the sealed truth.
It's a cryptographic checksum, essentially a verification mark proving that a shipment or an agent has been fully authenticated by the network.
Unbelievable. The ledger also maps their global shipping routes. The inspector sees innocent geographic placeholders.
But one resolves to Pocan, which signals Amsterdam, the primary global hub for Sephardic freedom. Another abbreviation resolves to Pasan, referencing the island trade node of Curaçao. They are coordinating complex maritime logistics with the Dutch without ever writing the forbidden names of those rival ports.
If an inquisitor looks at the ledger, they just see regional abbreviations and words like peace. But if you have the mirror key, it's a high-stakes rebel manifesto. But it wasn't just about money and ships, right? The ledgers also hid their souls.
Absolutely. The inspector sees a common regional name, but that bash decodes to Refa Pasek, meaning the healer priest. They are covertly tracking ancient priestly medical lineages.
Wow. He sees a term meaning the hiding, assuming it's a note about securing cargo. But it resolves to Zanif, the archaic Hebrew word for the high priest turban, a massive internal status indicator.
He sees an administrative abbreviation and ignores it. But it decodes to Kielef, meaning because of the first. It's an acronym signaling a direct lineage back to the northern lost tribes of Israel.
They are preserving a 1,000-year-old bloodline with what looks like a ledger typo.
And finally, the most powerful decode of all, an innocuous abbreviation that resolves to Rafat, meaning sanctuary or goal.
Oh, wow.
It was a cryptographic celebration, a quiet, hidden note used by the network to signal that a family branch had finally successfully escaped the Caribbean and relocated to safety.
It is absolutely mind-blowing when you put it all together. It's an encrypted spreadsheet of a massive smuggling operation deeply intertwined with ancient religious survival.
This raises an important question, though. If these families engineered their own invisibility so perfectly, if the geography, the engineered surnames, and the ledger cryptography were all practically impenetrable, how on earth are modern historians actually finding them today?
Right. They had to act like detectives. The researchers developed a 3-step method they call the archival ghost protocol. And it's fascinating because it's basically forensic accounting applied to 400-year-old history.
Step 1 was realizing they were looking in the wrong place. If you want to find a secret society, you don't look at the pristine, heavily curated official documents from the capital of San Juan.
Because those records were designed to show obedience.
Exactly. You have to accept geographic risk. You have to go digging into the dusty, messy, unmonitored interior archives, the high-risk, deeply hidden areas like San Germán and Jayuya, where the masking was most intense.
Step 2 is looking for the ghost in the machine. Historians hunt through these mundane, romance-language business accounts, specifically looking for anomalies.
Right. They're searching for that subtle left-to-right orientation of Semitic concepts hiding inside the phonetic spelling, exactly like the Atbash decodes we just walked through. They're looking for the mirror.
And step 3 is the breaking point. It's the onomastic cross-referencing protocol. This is where the detective work really pays off.
Right. Historians take the external camouflage surnames found on Puerto Rican shipping manifests, the Gomes, Lopes, DaCosta, and Torres families, and they meticulously cross-reference them against the internal protected records of the Sephardic safe harbors in Europe.
So what does this all mean? Well, this is the cinematic climax of the data. It's the exact moment the web is finally revealed. Imagine a merchant family that has lived for generations in hiding. They finally make their move.
Yeah.
They escape the Joyua Mountains. They survive the treacherous mule trek down to the coast. They survive the illicit, dead-of-night boat ride out of Mayaguez, and they finally arrive safely in a port like Amsterdam or Curacao. And the very moment they are safe, they drop the camouflage.
The intersection is just undeniable. A Spanish shipping manifest from the Cordillera Central says a man named Rivera left the island. A few months later, a Dutch marriage certificate in a safe harbor shows a man with the exact same familial data, but the name Rivera is gone.
He drops it entirely.
In its place, he signs his true ancient lineage name, Levi or Kohanim.
The moment they reach safety, the zip file opens. The camouflage dissolves. That specific intersection of paperwork is the exact moment a 400-year-old vault clicks open for historians.
It is a profound testament to systemic resilience. When faced with total institutional erasure, these families didn't just passively survive, they weaponized their environment.
Yeah, they really did.
They turned the muddy geography of the mountains into a physical ecosystem to protect their community. They engineered their surnames to compress their faith, and they turned the phonetic sounds of the alphabet itself into an unbreakable vault.
It shows us that identity, even when forced into the darkest shadows, doesn't just disappear. It adapts. It finds a new syntax, new mirror, and it waits patiently across centuries for someone who finally knows how to read the reflection.
It's incredible.
For you listening right now, it is worth pausing to just appreciate the sheer human ingenuity required to keep a culture alive when a global superpower demands its absolute destruction. Today, we leave behind massive, highly visible digital footprints. We rely entirely on external servers, biometrics, and complex passwords to protect who we are.
Yeah, we take it all for granted.
We really do. But imagine stripping all of that technology away. Think about the Steganography we discussed today. If you were forced to compress your entire family history, your core identity, and your deepest beliefs into a single, common, everyday word to pass down to your great-grandchildren in absolute secret, what word would you choose?